East Harlem, New York, January 26, 1891. Francesco Costello enters the world in a cramped tenement apartment on 108th Street. His mother, Maria, grips the bedsheets as snow falls outside the fourth-floor window. The midwife cuts the umbilical cord with kitchen scissors. The father, Luigi Costello, counts 17 cents in his pocket. He works 12 hours daily at a construction site on the Lower East Side. The baby weighs 6 pounds 2 ounces. 4 years pass. Luigi Costello boards the steamship Sardegna at the port of Naples with his wife and 2 sons. The crossing takes 14 days. Francesco, now called Frankie, vomits into a metal bucket during rough seas. The ship docks at Ellis Island on March 3, 1895. Immigration officers record the family name as Costello. Luigi carries a canvas bag containing their entire possessions, 2 changes of clothes, a wooden crucifix and $43 in American currency. The Costello family settles at 102nd Street and 2nd Avenue. Luigi opens a small grocery store measuring 24 feet by 16 feet. The monthly rent is $18. Maria tends to customers while Luigi stacks shelves with imported olive oil, pasta, and canned tomatoes. Frankie learns English by listening to neighborhood children. He speaks with a thick East Harlem accent that will never leave his voice. 1904. Frankie Costello, age 13, joins the 104th Street gang. The gang controls 6 city blocks between 1st and 3rd Avenues. Their leader, Joey Torrio, teaches young recruits how to pick pockets and steal from delivery wagons. Frankie demonstrates exceptional skill at dice games played in basement speakeasies. His fingers move quickly across wooden tables as older men place bets. He wins $14 in his first week. The gang operates from a pool hall on 105th Street. 23 members range in age from 12 to 19. They wear identical black wool caps and carry brass knuckles in their back pockets. Police officer Patrick O'Malley of the 23rd Precinct knows each member by name, but accepts $5 weekly to look the other way. Frankie delivers these payments every Thursday at 4 p.m. November 12, 1908. Frankie Costello, now 17, commits his first major crime. He and 2 associates rob a pushcart vendor at East 116th Street and Lexington Avenue. The vendor, Salvatore Boldi, carries $23 in small bills. Frankie holds a straight razor to Boldi's throat while his partners empty the cash box. A witness, Mrs. Elena Russo, watches from her 3rd-floor apartment window. She provides descriptions to police. Detective Sergeant Thomas Flanagan of the East Harlem Precinct arrests Frankie 3 days later. The arrest report lists his height as 5 feet 7 inches, weight 143 pounds, dark brown hair, brown eyes. He spends 6 months in the Tombs prison on Center Street. His cellmate, Angelo Palmieri, teaches him card tricks and explains the hierarchy of organized crime families. Frankie listens carefully to every word. 1910. Francesco Costello legally changes his name to Frank Costello. The paperwork costs $3 and is filed at the New York County Clerk's office on October 15th. He tells friends the new name sounds more American. His mother cries when she learns of the change. She continues calling him Francesco until her death in 1923. Frank Costello meets Charles Luciano at a crap game in Little Italy. The date is February 8, 1913. Luciano, 3 years older, controls illegal gambling operations on Mulberry Street. The 2 men shake hands inside Tony Pastor's saloon on the corner of Hester and Mott Streets. Luciano wears a grey wool suit and smokes Turkish cigarettes. Costello notices Luciano's manicured fingernails and polished shoes. Their first business venture involves loading stolen merchandise from the Fulton Fish Market. Costello recruits 6 men to unload trucks between midnight and 4 a.m. They steal cases of lobster, salmon, and oysters, selling them to restaurants in the Bronx and Queens. The operation generates $400 weekly profit. Costello keeps detailed records in a leather-bound notebook, recording every transaction in precise handwriting. The partnership expands rapidly. Costello and Luciano establish connections with Vito Genovese, Meyer Lansky, and Benjamin Siegel. They meet weekly at Ferrara's Bakery on Grand Street, occupying the same corner table every Tuesday at 2 p.m. The baker, Antonio Ferrara, serves espresso in small white cups and closes the front door during their conversations. No customers are permitted inside for exactly 1 hour. 1918. Frank Costello marries Loretta Geigerman at St. Patrick's Cathedral. The ceremony begins at 10 a.m. on September 15th. Loretta wears her grandmother's wedding dress, altered by a seamstress on Orchard Street. 67 guests attend the reception at a restaurant on Mulberry Street. The wedding cake weighs 12 pounds and costs $8. Luciano serves as best man, wearing a new black tuxedo. That same year, Costello serves 10 months in prison for carrying a concealed weapon. The gun, a .38 caliber revolver, was found during a police search outside a gambling den on East 14th Street. Costello tells the judge he carried the weapon for protection. His lawyer, Morris Ernst, argues that his client feared retaliation from rival gangs. The judge sentences Costello to 1 year in Sing Sing prison, reduced to 10 months for good behavior. Prison changes Frank Costello's perspective on criminal operations. He observes that most inmates are caught because they act impulsively and violently. Costello decides to operate differently. He will use intelligence, planning, and political connections instead of brute force. Fellow inmates notice that Costello never participates in fights or arguments. He spends his time reading newspapers and law books in the prison library. January 16, 1920. The Volstead Act becomes law at 12:01 a.m. Prohibition transforms America overnight. Frank Costello recognizes the enormous profit potential in illegal alcohol distribution. He contacts Luciano immediately after Congress passes the legislation. They arrange a meeting for January 20th at a restaurant on Spring Street. The restaurant owner, Giuseppe Romano, provides a private dining room on the second floor. Lower East Side, New York. January 20th, 1920. Frank Costello climbs 23 wooden steps to Romano's restaurant. Lucky Luciano sits at a table covered with white cloth. 2 glasses of red wine wait beside a plate of veal cutlets. Steam rises from the food in the cold dining room. Costello removes his overcoat and hangs it on a wooden chair. The temperature outside measures 18 degrees Fahrenheit. Luciano speaks first. Prohibition makes us rich. He produces a map of New York City and spreads it across the table. Red circles mark potential locations for speakeasies and illegal distilleries. Costello counts 37 marked locations between the Battery and 125th Street. Each location requires protection money, transportation, and political connections. They calculate initial startup costs at $50,000. The 2 men recruit Meyer Lansky and Benjamin Siegel to join their bootlegging operation. The first meeting takes place on February 3, 1920 in a basement beneath a barber shop on Delancey Street. Lansky brings detailed financial projections written on 3 sheets of paper. Illegal whiskey costs $3 per bottle to produce and sells for $12 at speakeasies. A single truck can transport 240 bottles. Daily profit potential exceeds $2,000. They establish their first distillery in a warehouse on the Brooklyn waterfront. The building measures 80 feet by 120 feet with 14-foot ceilings. Costello negotiates a monthly lease for $85. They install 12 copper stills, each capable of producing 50 gallons of whiskey daily. The equipment costs $1,200, purchased from a supplier in Philadelphia who accepts cash payments only. March 15, 1920. The first batch of whiskey completes the distillation process. Costello tastes the product at 3:30 p.m. The alcohol content measures 86 proof. He approves the quality and authorizes production of 500 bottles for initial distribution. Workers fill bottles by hand using metal funnels. Each bottle receives a handwritten label reading Old Kentucky Bourbon aged 8 years. The distribution network expands across Manhattan and Brooklyn. Costello establishes relationships with 23 speakeasy owners between January and June 1920. Each location orders between 12 and 48 bottles weekly. Deliveries occur every Tuesday and Friday between 2 a.m. and 5 a.m. Drivers use modified trucks with hidden compartments behind the cab. Police corruption becomes essential to the operation's success. Costello identifies key officers in each precinct who accept bribes. Detective Lieutenant William Murphy of the 14th Precinct receives $200 monthly. Sergeant James O'Brien of the 19th Precinct receives $150 monthly. Captain Michael Sullivan of the 7th Precinct receives $300 monthly. Costello maintains detailed records of all payments in a coded ledger. Arnold Rothstein provides financial backing for major expansions. The legendary gambler and fixer meets Costello at the Astor Hotel on October 12, 1920. Rothstein wears a diamond pin in his silk tie and carries a gold-headed walking stick. He offers $100,000 in startup capital for a 25% share of all profits. Costello accepts the terms without negotiation. The bootlegging operation generates massive profits by year's end. Total revenue for 1920 reaches $847,000. Operating expenses, including bribes, transportation, and raw materials, total $312,000. Net profit equals $535,000, divided equally among the four partners. Costello deposits his share, $133,750, in three separate bank accounts under different names. 1921 brings territorial conflicts with rival gangs. The Irish White Hand Gang attempts to hijack a whiskey shipment on March 8, 1921. 5 armed men stop a Costello truck at the Brooklyn Navy Yard entrance. The driver, Tony Benedetto, surrenders 12 cases of whiskey without resistance. Costello learns of the theft within 4 hours through his network of informants. Rather than retaliate with violence, Costello chooses negotiation. He arranges a meeting with White Hand leader Dinny Meehan at a neutral location, a barbershop on Court Street in Brooklyn. The meeting occurs on March 12, 1921, at 11 a.m. Costello offers Meehan $2,000 compensation for the stolen whiskey plus $500 monthly payments to avoid future conflicts. Meehan accepts the proposal. This diplomatic approach becomes Costello's trademark strategy. While other crime bosses engage in bloody territorial wars, Costello negotiates peaceful arrangements. He establishes formal agreements with 7 different gangs by the end of 1921. These agreements define territories, establish pricing structures, and create dispute resolution mechanisms. Violence becomes unnecessary when everyone profits. Political connections expand beyond simple police corruption. Costello cultivates relationships with Tammany Hall district leaders who control judicial appointments and city contracts. He attends political dinners at the Commodore Hotel, contributing $1,000 to Democratic campaigns. These investments yield immediate returns when judges dismiss charges against his associates. The operation requires increasingly sophisticated logistics. Costello establishes coordination centers in rented offices on Wall Street and in the Garment District. Telegraph operators receive coded messages about shipment schedules and delivery locations. Bookkeepers track inventory using a numerical system that conceals actual product names. Lawyers stand ready to post bail for arrested drivers. By 1922, the Costello-Luciano organization controls 40% of illegal alcohol distribution in New York City. They operate 17 distilleries and own interests in 127 speakeasies. Weekly revenue averages $45,000. The organization employs 312 people, including truck drivers, guards, bookkeepers, and sales representatives. Costello personally approves all major decisions and reviews financial reports every Monday morning. The partnership with other crime families strengthens during this period. Costello meets regularly with Joe Masseria, the most powerful Sicilian boss in New York. These meetings occur at Masseria's restaurant on East 12th Street. Masseria controls dock workers who facilitate liquor imports from Canada and Europe. Costello negotiates favorable rates for protection services at the waterfront. Legal challenges multiply as federal agents intensify enforcement efforts. Prohibition agents raid 2 Costello warehouses in November 1922, seizing 1,847 bottles of whiskey and arresting 6 employees. Costello immediately hires the law firm of Howe and Hummel, paying $5,000 in advance fees. The lawyers file motions challenging the search warrants and evidence collection procedures. Manhattan Federal Courthouse, December 14, 1922. Judge Harold Phillips calls the courtroom to order. Frank Costello sits at the defendant's table wearing a navy blue suit and white shirt. His lawyer, William Fallon, arranges legal documents in neat stacks. 12 jurors occupy the jury box, including 4 Italian Americans who nod respectfully when they see Costello. The prosecution presents evidence of illegal whiskey production, but key witnesses fail to appear for testimony. The trial concludes on December 19, 1922. The jury deliberates for 37 minutes before returning a not guilty verdict on all charges. Judge Phillips dismisses the case at 3:15 p.m. Costello shakes hands with each juror as they exit the courthouse. He later learns that 3 witnesses received $500 each to relocate to Philadelphia during the trial period. This legal victory establishes Costello's reputation for avoiding convictions through preparation and influence rather than intimidation. He studies legal procedures and maintains files on every judge, prosecutor, and federal agent in the Southern District of New York. His office safe contains detailed information about their personal finances, family relationships, and political ambitions. 1925 brings a major territorial expansion opportunity. Giuseppe Morello, the original clutch hand boss, dies of natural causes on August 15, 1925. His territory covers East Harlem and the Bronx, including 16 profitable numbers running banks and 7 gambling parlors. Costello proposes a joint takeover with Luciano rather than a violent succession war. The Morello organization's assets total approximately $200,000 in cash, plus ongoing revenue streams worth $8,000 weekly. Costello and Luciano divide the territory along geographical lines. Costello takes East Harlem north of 96th Street, while Luciano controls operations south of 96th Street. This peaceful transition prevents bloodshed and maintains profit flow without interruption. Political influence becomes Costello's primary weapon for expansion and protection. He cultivates relationships with Tammany Hall leaders, including district captains, city council members, and municipal judges. These relationships require careful maintenance through campaign contributions, legal fees for their relatives, and favorable business arrangements for their associates. Costello's most important political connection develops with James Hines, the powerful Tammany district leader who controls judicial appointments in Manhattan. Their first meeting occurs at the Democratic Club on East 58th Street on March 7, 1926. Hines wears a 3-piece gray suit and smokes Cuban cigars. He explains that judicial cooperation costs $10,000 per judge, plus ongoing monthly payments of $1,000. The investment in judicial corruption pays immediate dividends. Between 1926 and 1928, 14 associates of the Costello organization face criminal charges in Manhattan courts. 13 cases result in acquittals or dismissed charges. The single conviction involves a truck driver who pleads guilty to a misdemeanor and receives 30 days in jail. Meyer Lansky emerges as Costello's closest advisor during this period. Lansky's mathematical mind perfectly complements Costello's political instincts. Together they analyze profit margins, territorial boundaries, and risk assessments for every business venture. They meet every Tuesday at 10 o'clock at Hay. Misso in Costello's office at 405 Lexington Avenue. The office serves as headquarters for increasingly complex operations. Costello employs 6 full-time accountants who maintain separate books for each business entity. Legal expenses alone total $50,000 annually, paid to 12 different law firms to avoid appearance of centralized control. Communication occurs through coded telephone messages and encrypted telegrams. 1928 introduces new challenges as federal authorities intensify their investigation of organized crime. Special Agent Elliot Ness arrives in New York from Chicago with a team of incorruptible investigators. They employ new surveillance techniques including wiretaps, hidden cameras, and undercover agents. Costello responds by compartmentalizing operations and limiting direct communication with subordinates. The approaching end of Prohibition forces strategic planning for alternative revenue sources. Costello and Luciano identify gambling, labor racketeering, and loan sharking as the most profitable post-Prohibition activities. They begin establishing illegal casinos in Manhattan and Queens using the same political protection networks developed during bootlegging operations. November 6, 1928. Herbert Hoover wins the presidential election, defeating Al Smith by 444 electoral votes. Smith's defeat represents a setback for Tammany Hall and its organized crime allies. Costello immediately begins cultivating relationships with Republican politicians who might gain influence under the new administration. The Castellammarese War begins brewing in early 1929 as tensions escalate between Joe Masseria and Salvatore Maranzano. Both bosses seek to control all Italian-American crime families in New York. Costello and Luciano initially remain neutral, carefully avoiding actions that might favor either side. They understand that backing the losing faction could result in death or exile. Masseria demands that Costello choose sides during a meeting at his restaurant on February 12, 1929. Masseria pounds his fist on the table and threatens to eliminate any family that remains neutral. Costello requests 1 week to consider the ultimatum. He immediately contacts Luciano to plan their response to this dangerous situation. The two men decide to play both sides while secretly planning the elimination of both war leaders. They maintain surface loyalty to Masseria while establishing communication channels with Maranzano lieutenants. This duplicitous strategy requires extreme caution, as discovery would mean immediate execution by either faction. March 15, 1929. The Castellammarese War officially begins when Maranzano soldiers kill 3 Masseria associates in a Bronx social club. The victims are found shot multiple times in the club's back room. Police discover $847 in cash still in their wallets, indicating the murders were not robberies. Detective Captain William Matthews describes the scene as professional executions. Costello maintains careful neutrality while secretly gathering intelligence about both factions' strengths and weaknesses. His political connections provide information about police raid schedules and federal investigations. This intelligence proves valuable to both sides, allowing Costello to demonstrate usefulness without committing to either faction. The war intensifies throughout 1929 and early 1930. 63 people die in related violence between March 1929 and February 1931. Costello survives by avoiding public appearances and conducting business through intermediaries. He temporarily relocates his family to a rented house in Westchester County for their protection. Nuova Villa Tamaro Restaurant, Coney Island, April 15 Virgola, 1931. Joe Masseria sits at a corner table playing cards with Lucky Luciano, Vito Genovese and Joe Adonis. The restaurant overlooks the Atlantic Ocean. Waves crash against the pier 50 yards away. Masseria holds 3 aces and 2 kings. He drinks red wine from a water glass and eats linguine with clam sauce. The restaurant contains only these 4 men and the owner's elderly mother. Luciano excuses himself to use the bathroom at 3:43 p.m. Genovese and Adonis follow immediately. Masseria looks up from his cards as 4 gunmen enter through the front door. Albert Anastasia fires first, hitting Masseria in the chest. Benjamin Siegel shoots twice into Masseria's head. The other gunmen fire additional shots to ensure death. 20 bullets strike Masseria's body. The gunmen exit through the rear door. At 3:46 p.m. Luciano returns from the bathroom. 3 minutes later, he places a telephone call to Police Captain John Ryan at 3:52 p.m., reporting the discovery of Masseria's body. Ryan arrives with 2 detectives at 4:18 p.m. Luciano claims he heard gunshots while in the bathroom, but saw nothing. Frank Costello learns of Masseria's death within 1 hour through his police contacts. He immediately calls a meeting with his top lieutenants at a warehouse on the Brooklyn waterfront. 17 men attend this emergency session. Arriving separately to avoid attention, Costello explains that the Castellammarese War will end within days through negotiation rather than additional violence. Salvatore Maranzano declares victory and calls for a peace conference on May 10, 1931. The meeting occurs at a rented hall in the Bronx. Representatives from all 5 major crime families attend, including Costello as Luciano's underboss. Maranzano announces the establishment of formal family structures with himself as boss of all bosses. Maranzano assigns territories and responsibilities to each family leader. The Luciano family, led by Luciano with Costello as underboss, receives Manhattan below 125th Street and most of Brooklyn. Their operations include gambling, loans harking, labor racketeering, and the remaining bootlegging activities. Maranzano demands 10% of all profits as tribute. This arrangement lasts exactly 4 months and 26 days. Luciano and Costello secretly plan Maranzano's elimination while publicly accepting his authority. They recruit Jewish gangsters Meyer Lansky and Benjamin Siegel, knowing that Maranzano's bodyguards will not suspect non-Italians. The assassination is scheduled for September 10, 1931. Four gunmen posing as federal agents enter Maranzano's office at 230 Park Avenue at 2:15 p.m. They show fake badges to his secretary and demand to see Maranzano immediately. The secretary, Rose Caruso, escorts them to Maranzano's private office on the 9th floor. Maranzano sits behind his mahogany desk reviewing financial ledgers. The gunmen shoot Maranzano 6 times and stab him 4 times with kitchen knives to ensure death. They exit the building through the service elevator at 2:22 p.m. A taxi driver named William Murphy later identifies 2 of the killers from police photographs, but both have alibis placing them in Atlantic City at the time of the murder. The Castellamarese War ends with Maranzano's death. 67 people died during the 2-year conflict, including 12 crime family leaders and 38 soldiers. Property damage totals approximately $500,000. Police recorded 127 separate shooting incidents and 43 bombings related to the war. Lucky Luciano assumes control of the most powerful crime family in New York on September 11, 1931. He immediately restructures the organization according to plans developed with Costello over many months. The old boss of all bosses system is abolished. Instead, 5 equal families will govern organized crime through a commission system. The commission holds its first meeting on October 15, 1931, in a private dining room at the Warwick Hotel. The 5 family leaders attend: Lucky Luciano, Vincent Mangano, Tommy Gagliano, Joseph Profasi, and Joseph Bonanno. Frank Costello participates as Luciano's underboss and chief advisor on political matters. Costello's role in the new structure focuses on maintaining relationships with politicians, judges, and police officials. His network of corruption extends throughout New York City government and into federal agencies. This political protection allows all 5 families to operate with minimal law enforcement interference. The repeal of prohibition on December 5, 1933, forces major organizational changes. Bootlegging revenues disappear overnight, but Costello has prepared alternative income sources. Illegal gambling becomes the primary revenue generator, followed by labor racketeering in construction unions and loan sharking operations. Costello establishes the most sophisticated gambling operation in New York history. Illegal casinos open in Manhattan penthouses, Brooklyn warehouses, and Queens social clubs. The flagship operation occupies 3 floors of a building at 405 Park Avenue. Wealthy businessmen and politicians lose thousands of dollars nightly at rigged card games and roulette wheels. 1937 brings the moment that transforms Frank Costello into the Prime Minister of the Underworld. Lucky Luciano receives a 30 to 50-year prison sentence for compulsory prostitution on June 7, 1936. Vito Genovese flees to Italy in 1937 to avoid murder charges. This creates a power vacuum at the top of the most powerful crime family. The commission meets on February 18, 1937, to select Luciano's successor. The meeting occurs at Tommy Lucchese's restaurant in the Bronx. After 3 hours of discussion, the leaders unanimously choose Frank Costello as acting boss. Costello accepts the position at 6:47 p.m., but becoming the most powerful organized crime leader in America. Costello's first act as boss involves reorganizing the family's power structure. He promotes loyal lieutenants, including Anthony Strollo, Philip Mangano, and Vincent Allo, to key positions. These appointments ensure smooth transition and maintain discipline within the organization's 300 active members. The title Prime Minister of the Underworld emerges from Costello's unique governing style. Unlike previous bosses who ruled through fear and violence, Costello operates through negotiation and political influence. He resolves disputes between families through commission meetings rather than warfare. Newspaper reporters begin using the Prime Minister nickname in 1938. By December 31, 1940, Frank Costello controls the largest criminal organization in American history. The Luciano family generates $12 million annually through gambling, labor racketeering, and loan sharking. Political corruption costs $500,000 yearly, but provides protection worth 10 times that amount. Frank Costello, the immigrant boy from East Harlem, had become exactly what the newspapers called him, the Prime Minister of the Underworld.